The thick night fog rolled in slowly, swallowing the parking lot and creeping toward the old warehouse like an incoming tide. The only source of light was the dim yellow glow from the security booth, where I sat watching the monitors, struggling to keep my eyes open. The place had been shut down for years, but for some reason, the company still paid for overnight security. It was easy money, mostly sitting around, checking cameras, and walking the perimeter once every few hours. That night, though, something felt different. It started with movement on the monitor, a flicker on the farthest camera, barely visible through the static. I leaned forward. There, standing at the edge of the fog, was a figure, tall, unmoving, just barely out of the light. I blinked, rubbing my eyes. When I looked again, the figure was gone. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding and sat back in my chair. Probably a glitch, I told myself. The cameras were old, the feeds unreliable, but still, something gnawed at me. I checked the exterior monitors again. Nothing. Just an empty parking lot, the mist curling around the edges of the fence. I shook it off and turned on the radio to break the silence. Static. I adjusted the dial. More static. Then, hello? I stiffened. The voice was faint, distant, like someone speaking from the bottom of a well. Who's there? I asked, gripping the radio. The static crackled and then a whisper. Don't look away. A chill crawled down my spine. My eyes darted back to the monitor, and my breath caught in my throat. The figure was back, closer just standing there in the mist. I swallowed hard, fighting the urge to turn away. My pulse pounded in my ears. The radio hissed with more static, and then, knock! The sound came from the booth window, inches from where I sat. I jerked my head around, but there was nothing there, just darkness pressing against the glass. My own pale reflection staring back at me. I was done. I grabbed my flashlight and yanked open the booth door, stepping outside. The cold night air bit at my skin. The warehouse loomed in front of me, silent and abandoned. I swept the light around the lot. Empty. I exhaled sharply, turning to go back inside, and froze. The figure was standing at the far end of the lot, but now it was facing me. I couldn't see a face, couldn't make out any features at all. Just a silhouette, tall and thin, slightly blurred at the edge like it wasn't fully there. A sharp ringing filled my ears. My instincts screamed at me to run, but my body refused to move. I gripped the flashlight tighter. The figure took a step forward. My chest tightened. I backed away, my foot catching on the threshold of the booth. I stumbled inside and slammed the door shut, locking it. My breath came in short gasps. The radio crackled again. Turn around! The hair on my neck stood up. Slowly, I turned my head toward the monitors. The figure was gone, but something else was. One of the screens showed me sitting in the booth, frozen in fear, but something was off. My reflection in the monitor was smiling. I jerked away from the screen, heart hammering. My breathing grew ragged. A shadow passed outside the window. Number it wasn't outside. It was behind me. I spun around, but the room was empty. Just the chair, the desk, the humming monitor. Then, the lights flickered, and for the briefest moment, in the reflection of the glass, I saw it, standing right behind me. Everything went black. I woke up outside, lying on the cold pavement, my limbs aching. The sky was beginning to lighten, the thick fog thinning. My uniform was torn, and my arms were covered in deep, jagged scratches. I scrambled to my feet, looking around. The security booth was empty. The monitors inside flickered with static. I didn't wait. I grabbed my keys and sprinted to my car, peeling out of the lot without looking back. A week later, the warehouse burned to the ground. The cause was never determined. I quit the job the next day, but sometimes, late at night, I still hear the static. And sometimes, in the corner of my vision, I see the shadow standing just beyond the light, waiting. I was exhausted that night, trudging home after my late-night shift at the diner. The streets were empty, the air thick with the scent of rain. I decided to take a shortcut through a part of town I wasn't too familiar with, just a few blocks off my usual route. It didn't seem like a big deal at the time. When I reached my apartment building, I barely glanced up. My feet carried me up the stairs, my mind already focused on collapsing into bed. My key slid into the lock, the door opened with its familiar creak, and I stepped inside. But something was off. At first, I couldn't tell what it was. The apartment looked the same. Same layout, same furniture, same dim glow from the street lamp outside my window. I tossed my bag onto the couch and kicked off my shoes. I told myself I was just tired, but the feeling didn't go away. I moved toward the kitchen, flipping on the light. A plate sat in the sink, a dirty plate. I hadn't eaten at home that. A cold chill slid down my spine. I turned to the fridge. A sticky note was attached to the door, written in my own handwriting. You have to leave. I took a step back, my pulse spiking. I didn't remember writing that. I reached for my phone to check my messages, but the screen was dark, dead. That's when I noticed the photos on the wall. At first glance, they looked like the ones I'd always had. Me with friends, my family, a birthday party from years ago. But as I stared closer, my stomach clenched. The faces were blurred. No, not blurred, distorted, like someone had smeared them with wet fingers, twisting their expressions into grotesque, melted versions. I stumbled backward, my breath quickening. My head snapped toward my bedroom. The door was ajar, just slightly, as if someone had left it open a crack. And then I heard it, a voice, coming from inside the room. My voice. Hello? I nearly bolted right then. My instincts screamed at me to run, but my body wouldn't move. I took one slow, trembling step toward the door, then another. The air inside the apartment felt thick, heavy, suffocating. I reached out, fingers brushing the edge of the door. I pushed it open just a little further, and then I saw it. A figure standing in the dark. Not just standing, facing the wall, motionless. It was me. Same hair, same clothes, same everything, except it wasn't me, because as soon as I stepped forward, its head snapped to the side. Far too fast, far too unnatural, and it smiled. I didn't even have time to scream. The lights cut out. The air turned ice cold. I felt something rush past me, whispering in my own voice. You shouldn't be here. I don't remember leaving the apartment. I don't remember running down the stairs. All I know is I woke up in the alley 2 blocks away, my hands scraped, my heart slamming against my ribs. But when I looked up at the building, the apartment wasn't there. Just a vacant lot. I still don't know what happened then. My actual apartment, my real apartment, was 2 streets over. When I got there, everything was normal. My photos, my fridge, my phone, everything exactly how I left. But sometimes, late at night, I wake up and hear something. A voice, my own voice, whispering on the other side of my bedroom. I never believed in ghosts, not until the night I stayed at the motel. I was driving cross-country trying to make good time before an incoming storm hit. The road stretched on for miles, empty and desolate. When the first drops of rain hit my windshield, I decided to call it for the night. That's when I saw the sign, Vacancy, Sunset Pines Motel. The place looked abandoned. The neon sign flickered weakly, and the parking lot was nearly empty except for an old pickup truck. But I was too tired to be picky. The lobby smelled like stale air and dust. An old man sat behind the counter, staring at a static-filled TV. He barely looked at me as he slid a key across the counter. Room 108, he muttered. Something about his tone unsettled me. I hesitated. Is everything all right? His bloodshot eyes flickered up to meet mine. Don't open the closet. I let out a nervous chuckle, thinking it was some kind of weird joke. He didn't laugh. I took the key and left. The room was exactly what I expected. Dim lighting, stiff sheets, the faint scent of mildew. I locked the door, tossed my bag on the chair, and collapsed onto the bed. I told myself I wouldn't even look at the closet, but that only made it worse. I could feel it. It was a plain wooden door at the far end of the room, nothing unusual. But as I lay there, my exhaustion fading into unease, the feeling of being watched crept over me. I turned over, facing away from it, pulled the blanket up, closed my eyes, then thump, a single dull knock from inside the closet. My body stiffened. I held my breath, listening, silent. I must have imagined just the wind or the building settling. Thump, louder this. My heart pounded. I sat up slowly, my eyes locked on the closet door. The room was dead silent except for the low hum of the air conditioner. Then, the doorknob twisted, not violently, not fast. A slow, deliberate turn. I bolted out of bed, scrambling for my bag. My mind screamed at me to get out, but my body was frozen in place. The knob stopped turning, and then, so faint I almost didn't hear it. Please help me. I backed toward the door, fumbling with the lock. My hands were slick with sweat, and then I heard it. A scratching, slow, deliberate, coming from inside the closet. I could not look away. Something moved behind the door. A shadow, long, stretching unnaturally up the wall. The scratching grew faster, more frantic. Then, bang! The entire door shook. I yanked the door open and ran. I don't remember my car. I don't remember starting the engine. All I remember is glancing at the motel as I peeled out of the lot and seeing the old man standing in the doorway, staring, smiling, mouthing 2 words. Too late. I drove for hours before stopping. When I finally calmed down, I grabbed my phone to look up the motel. There was nothing. No Sunset Pines Motel. No record of it ever existed. But when I reached into my pocket, the key to room 108 was still there. I was 16 when I took the babysitting job. The family lived in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of town, the kind of place where the streetlights barely reached the driveways. The house itself was old, a little rundown, but cozy in a way that made it feel lived in. Mrs. Holloway, the mother, gave me a quick tour before leaving. Sam is already asleep upstairs, she said, glancing at the clock. He usually sleeps through the night, but if he wakes up, just tell him to go back to bed. Her tone was strange, almost nervous. I nodded, brushing it off, and watched as she and her husband left for their anniversary dinner. The night was uneventful at first. I settled onto the couch, flipping through channels, half listening to the creaks and groans of the old house. Around 10 p.m., I heard it, a soft thud from upstairs. I froze, my eyes flicking toward the ceiling. Another thud. Then, the sound of small feet running down the hall. I sighed. Just Sam. I climbed the stairs and found him standing outside his bedroom, his tiny frame barely illuminated by the hallway light. "What's up, buddy?" I asked, keeping my voice soft. His wide eyes met mine. "There's someone in my closet." I felt a prickle of unease, but forced a smile. "It's just your imagination. Let's get you back to bed." He shook his head violently. I saw him. A small shiver ran down my spine. I didn't want to scare him, so I stepped into his room, flipping on the light. The closet door stood slightly ajar. I hesitated. "See," said, opening it fully. "Thing here." I was about to turn back when I noticed the smell. The closet reeked of damp earth, like rotting leaves and wet wood. It was such a strong, unnatural scent that I instinctively stepped back. Then I saw them, handprints, smudged into the back wall of the closet. Long, dark streaks, like something had been crawling out. A rush of panic surged through me. I grabbed Sam and backed away, my pulse hammering. "Let's sleep downstairs tonight, okay?" He nodded, clinging to me as I carried him down to the couch. I kept the TV on for background noise, trying to shake the creeping dread. Sometime past midnight, Sam whispered, "He's watching us." A chill locked my spine in place. I turned to him, my throat dry. "Who?" His little hand pointed toward the staircase. At first, I saw nothing, just the dimly lit steps leading to the second floor. Then, my stomach dropped. A figure stood at the top, not moving, not breathing, just standing. It was tall, too tall. Its limbs stretched unnaturally. The shadows obscured its face, but I could feel it staring. Sam buried his face in my shoulder. I couldn't move, couldn't blink. The thing just stood there, its body slightly swaying, like it was deciding what to do next. Then, it crawled, fast, unnatural, down the stairs on all fours. I grabbed Sam and bolted. The front door locked. The back door locked. Behind me, I heard the sound of something dragging itself across the floor. I don't remember unlocking the door. Don't remember running outside. All I remember is standing in the driveway, gasping for air, Sam sobbing in my arms. The house was silent, but the front door was wide open. Mr. and Mrs. Holloway returned minutes later, their faces drained of color when they saw us outside. They didn't ask what happened, didn't seem surprised. Mrs. Holloway only said one thing. "You saw him, didn't you?" I quit that night. Years later, curiosity got the better of me. I looked up the house. The Holloways had moved. The property had been sold, then abandoned. The listing described it as a 3-bedroom home, but I swear, when I was there, it had 4. Sam's room didn't exist. I used to work the night shift at a 24-hour gas station off a desolate highway. It wasn't the kind of place people stopped unless they were out of options. The neon sign flickered, the coffee was stale, and the security cameras barely worked. But it was quiet. Easy money. At least, that's what I thought. One night around 2 a.m., a car pulled in. Not unusual, except it wasn't really a car. It looked like one, sure. An old, beat-up sedan with rust creeping along its edges. But the way it moved, something was wrong. It didn't pull up smoothly. It jerked, like something inside was forcing it forward in unnatural motions. Then, it stopped. The engine didn't turn off. The headlights didn't dim. No one got out. I watched for a full minute, my hands gripping the counter. Nothing. I forced myself to step outside. The air was thick, heavy, almost humming. I knocked on the driver's side window. "Hey, you good?" The glass was too dark to see inside. No response. I knocked again, harder. "Station's open if you need something." Then, the window rolled down. Just a crack. A smell hit me instantly. Rotting meat, like something had been left to decay in the heat for weeks. I gagged, stepping back. That's when I heard it. A voice. It was wrong. Like a recording played backward, warped and garbled. "Need gas." My stomach twisted. Every part of me screamed to go back inside. "Sure," I forced out. "How much?" The voice glitched. Then, "Where am I?" I stumbled back. My skin prickled with something worse than fear. Primal instinct. Then, the car door opened. A foot stepped out. Except, it wasn't really a foot. It looked human, but the skin was wrong. Like wax, melting and reforming with every second. The toes twitched erratically. Too many joints bending the wrong way. I bolted inside and slammed the door. My breath came fast and sharp as I fumbled for my phone. No signal. I turned back to the lot. The car was still there, door open. The figure stood beside it now, half hidden in shadow. It was watching me. Then, the security camera screen flickered. For half a second, I saw something impossible. The gas station was gone. The pumps, the road, the sky. Everything was just black. And the figure? It was no longer outside. It was inside, standing right behind me. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. The screen flickered again. The gas station returned. The car was gone. The lot was empty. I turned slowly, my whole body shaking. Nothing was there. The door was still locked. The air was still, but the smell of rotting meat still lingered. I quit that morning. A week later, I drove past the station. It was abandoned, burned down, but the report said it happened months ago. I don't know what I saw that night. I don't want to know. But sometimes, on empty roads, I see headlights in my rearview mirror, and I never stop to check. I used to clean houses. It was decent work, quiet, routine. Most of my clients were normal, but there was one house, one job that still haunts me. It was an old Victorian home, tucked away in a part of town where the streets were narrow, the trees overgrown. The woman who hired me, Mrs. Willard, was polite but distant, her face pale and drawn. My husband passed recently, she murmured, avoiding my gaze. I haven't had the strength to keep up with the house. I nodded, offering my condolences. I'd cleaned for grieving clients before, but there was something off about her sadness. It felt heavier. She gave me a list of rooms to clean, but hesitated before handing it over. Don't go in the basement, she said, her voice tight. I didn't ask why. I should have. The work was straightforward at first, dusting, sweeping, scrubbing, but as the hours passed, a feeling settled over me, something unnatural. The air felt thick. The house was too quiet. At one point, I caught movement from the corner of my eye, a figure in the doorway. I turned quickly, expecting Mrs. Willard. No one was there. I told myself it was my imagination, but then I saw it. The footprints, faint, smudged prints on the dusty floor, leading to the basement door. I stood frozen, my pulse hammering. That door had been closed when I arrived, hadn't it? I forced myself to look away to keep cleaning, but I could feel it. The door, the footprints, the pressure in the air. Then a sound, a single knock from the other side of the basement. I held my breath. Another knock, slow, deliberate. I backed away, my mind racing. Maybe Mrs. Willard had forgotten something downstairs. Maybe knock, knock, knock. Louder this, more insistent. I ran. Mrs. Willard was in the kitchen, staring at nothing. Did you hear that? I whispered. She didn't respond at first. Then, in a voice barely above a breath, she said, He doesn't like being ignored. I turned slowly. Who? Her expression was empty. My husband. A chill ran down my spine. I wanted to leave, but my legs wouldn't move. And then, from the hallway, creak, the sound of the basement door opening. Mrs. Willard let out a shuddering breath. He's awake. That was enough. I grabbed my things and bolted. As I reached the front door, I made the mistake of looking back. Mrs. Willard stood motionless. The basement door was now wide open, and from the darkness below, a hand gripped the frame. Not human, not anymore. I never went back. A few weeks later, I checked the news, expecting to see something. A body found, a missing person report. Nothing. The house was listed for sale. No mention of Mrs. Willard. But in the listing photo, at the edge of the frame, the basement door was open, and something was standing inside the shadows, watching. I was 19 when I took a job as a night security guard at an old office building downtown. It wasn't a bad gig, just me, a radio, and a few silent floors to patrol. The place had been mostly abandoned, with only one company renting the top floor. The rest of the building was empty, or at least it was supposed to be. The first few nights were uneventful. I walked the halls, checked the locks, and spent most of my shift scrolling through my phone. But then, on the fourth night, I noticed something strange. The elevator. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the doors slid open. No one was inside. I checked the security footage, expecting to see a glitch, maybe a power surge. But the camera feed showed something worse. The elevator had moved on its own. No buttons pressed, no calls from any floor. It had just descended from the top floor, stopped on the third, and opened. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was just a malfunction. But the next night, at 2:17 a.m., it happened again. Only this time, I heard footsteps, faint, shuffling movements, coming from down the hall. I grabbed my flashlight and followed the sound, my heart hammering. Nothing. The hallway was empty. The doors to the offices were locked, but the air felt different, heavier, like something was standing just out of sight. Then I saw it. The elevator doors were open again, and inside, a single handprint smeared across the back wall. It wasn't there before. I quit early that morning, but curiosity got the better of me. I looked up the building's history. Turns out there used to be a maintenance worker who took care of the place years ago. He worked the night shift, alone. One night, he got trapped in the elevator when it malfunctioned. He was found 3 days later, dead. The autopsy ruled it a heart attack, but the other guards at the time said his body wasn't alone when they found him. The cameras had caught something inside the elevator with him, something standing in the corner. I never went back. But sometimes, when I walk past that building late at night, I hear it, a ding. And when I look, the elevator doors are always open, waiting. I used to work as a delivery driver for a small, family-owned restaurant. It wasn't a bad job, Decent tips, flexible hours. Most of my deliveries were uneventful, except for one that still keeps me awake at night. It was a slow night, close to closing time, when the last order came. The address was outside of town, down a winding road that led into the woods. The owner, Mr. Patel, glanced at the order slip and frowned. This address? He hesitated. Are you sure you want to take this one? I shrugged. Why not? He didn't answer right away. Then, in a low voice, he said, just don't take any extra time. And whatever you do, don't step inside. I laughed it off, thinking he was messing with me. But as I pulled onto the dark, tree-lined road, my unease grew. The house sat alone, deep in the woods. It was old, the kind of place that looked like it had been forgotten by time. The porch light was on, but the windows were pitch black, like the house was watching me. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. Delivery! Then, a voice. Low, muffled, like it was coming from deep inside the house. Come in. My stomach twisted. Mr. Patel's warning echoed in my mind. I can just leave it out here, I called. Silence. Then, please, come in. The voice was wrong, flat, emotionless, like someone was repeating words they didn't understand. Every instinct screamed at me to leave. I set the bag down and turned to go, but then I heard it, scraping, a slow, dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. I didn't look back. I sprinted to my car, heart pounding, and peeled out of there as fast as I could. When I got back, Mr. Patel was waiting. He didn't ask me what happened. He just looked at me, his face grim. You saw it, didn't you? I didn't know what to say. He sighed. That house. No one should live there. I pulled out my phone to check the address again, but when I looked at the delivery app, the order was gone. No record of it. No address, no payment. Like it never happened. But I know what I saw, and I know that somewhere, deep in those woods, that house is still there, waiting for the next delivery.